Welcome, everybody. All right, we're talking about the trap feeling of a covenant marriage. It's not easy to break a covenant. Grounds for divorce in a covenant marriage are limited to abuse, adultery. Otherwise, couples have to seek counseling and wait 2 years. Yes, this is in a covenant marriage arranged by a faith-based thing, like a church, where they believe in a covenant marriage and require you to go above and beyond the legal contract of a marriage. And as opposed to the 6 to 12 month separation that is imposed on no fault divorces, the marriage movement of a covenant marriage is known as a legal and moral imperative in the union, and that you basically have to do a lot of hurdles to be able to reach the idea of getting divorced in a covenant marriage. And it's really interesting, and I'm not just talking about a covenant marriage from a faith-based institution, but I'm also talking about the covenant of marriage and the idea that a lot of people will stay in a very miserable relationship because they are in a covenant. And let me explain why. It's really interesting that if you come from, let's say, a Christian perspective, to understand what a covenant really means in marriage. So the idea is that you go to church and there's a middle aisle in every church. Not every church, but most churches, you're going to find a middle aisle. Why is that? Well, that is what God did for Abraham. He created a covenant with Abraham, and that means that the aisle down the middle of the church represents the covenant. The whole idea is when you get married that the sacrifices is one family on one side and another family on the other side. And those are the sacrifices of your past for the covenant of marriage before God. The whole idea of a woman wearing a white dress is because that's all Abraham could see was the light of God. She often wears a veil because if Abraham saw God's face, he would die. So it's indicative of the light of God. God has entered the room. It's not that the bride is God, but she's representing the light of God and the presence of God in the room. And so there's a reverence. Here comes the bride. It's a big deal because that's like saying God is in the room. And then all of a sudden she comes up and she makes a covenant to man, man standing at the altar. So what happens is they make a covenant with each other. That's called your vows. Love, honor, cherish, or whatever stupid thing you make up, but it should be around love, honor, cherish. Those are very important components of marriage. So the covenant that people make to each other while they're standing at the altar is meant to be the only covenant you have on the planet Earth with another being to teach you how to love God. So that means if you can put up with all the crap and all the ego and all the stupid demands that your spouse makes and all the stupid quirkiness and all their little selfish tendencies and all their rules that they make up and pull out of their ass from somewhere on another planet, you have to deal with all that crap. And if you can deal with all that crap with this human being, you could do God all day long. And so this gauntlet that you run with this turd that you marry is meant to teach you how to love God. And you don't resolve your arguments with your spouse for them. You resolve it for your own salvation. Because the covenant you have with your spouse on earth is supposed to teach you exactly where you stand with God. How you handle your covenant on earth is meant to teach you where you stand with God. That doesn't mean how you treat your spouse, it's how you treat your covenant with your spouse is indicative of where you stand with God. And this goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. That's what the covenant is about. And that's why they make such a big deal out of it. Because it is your relationship with God. It is teaching you how to love God. So now that we have a nice 70% divorce rate, that tells you how sucky the relationship with human beings have with God in this day and age. What's also interesting is prior to, well, if you look at the statistics of arranged marriages where families are very involved in whether you succeed or not, where your community is very involved in whether you succeed or not, a arranged marriage has a 5 to 7% divorce rate compared to the 70% divorce rate that we currently hold in society today. Now, when we say covenant, that tends to be conservative and religious thoughts. And the overriding difference is a certainty that the relationship is the right one. The deal is you don't know whether this is going to be the right one. But what you have to understand is the happiness and the contentment that you have with your marriage is going to always, and the amount of conflict you have in your marriage is always going to be based on one simple ingredient. How well do you commit? Because if you're a shitty committer, if you're a person that sits around all day long fantasizing about what it will be like to be single and how many people you can have sex with and what sex would be like with your fellow employee or employee, a friend or whatever, you're really not that married. This debate of what it'll be like to be free, and then I go home and it's, oh yeah, I'm married, I'm a parent, I'm a spouse. So then they behave like a parent and a spouse while they're home, and then they go away, or they're off jacking off in the bedroom or whatever by themselves. They're all fantasizing about what it'll be like to be single. Now, there's the vast majority of people that are married or try to be married people. That means they sit around thinking about what it'll be like to be single while they're in a covenant of marriage. Now, if you want to make peace with your life and get the most out of anything in your life, it's based on your level of commitment. So if you're fully committed to your marriage, you don't have any reason to argue. What you have a reason to do is to figure out how to solve things. That's a whole big different ball game than sitting around arguing. People that argue, it's indicative that they have a really crappy commitment with each other because half of them is there and half of them isn't. They're in it for their own stupid needs. They're not trying to have a relationship. They're not really working on a relationship. What they're doing is trying to get their own personal needs met and have what looks like a covenant marriage to the rest of the world. It's foolish, but that's what people do. And it's a very expensive proposition. You know, people spend 40, 50 years miserable in their marriage because of their lack of commitment. And today, in this day and age, where we have all these narcissists and weirdos, the women with their little loop nose rings and their purple hair and their craziness, and guys with their stupid, don't know what sex they want to be. Now that we have a society like that, these people don't even know how to commit. They don't even want to make a living. They don't want to be in a job. They don't want to commit to anything anymore. So marriage is doomed when it comes to the human race as we currently see fit. But the deal is that covenant means a lot. It teaches you character. It teaches you the value of a commitment. That's a very, very important thing to understand. You know, do you approach your marriage as though it's a covenant or a contract? The difference is significant. Whether you're treating your spouse as a contract partner or a covenant partner can make all the difference in the world for having a fulfilling marriage. While we may have never considered whether our marriage is a contract or covenant, one of the approaches describes the framework of our marriage. And the framework shapes our daily interactions that we have with our spouse and our long-term health and our viability of the relationship. You know, the idea is, do you see your marriage as a contract or a covenant? And that's a very important thing because if it's a covenant, you're going to put your ego aside and resolve things with your partner so that you will grow spiritually. That doesn't mean you roll over. That doesn't mean you give in. But what it does mean is you're forced to not be right, like many idiots like to be that get divorced, but you actually are in this marriage to understand this other human being. You are actually in this marriage to understand their perception of you and the world, and you're not there to change it. You're there to work with it and to accept it and to even apologize for the perception that they may have towards you. That is what it takes to be married. The goal is understanding, not the need to be right. But intellectual people and analytical people, they have to be right about everything. And so they argue all day long, every day of their life. And they're really very crappy at covenants. A contract marriage is an I will if you. A covenant marriage is I will. So, once again, a contract marriage is I will if you ... and a covenant marriage is I will. A will is way different than a try. Try is like one of the worst words in the English language. It is a weasel word. It is a word with a back door. And if you try to be married, you're always married with a back door. And heck yeah, every time things don't go your way, every time your spouse turns into a monster, every time your kids are upset with you, every time something has been done that violates your expectations, you're going to stare at the back door. And you're going to fantasize about the back door. Now, if it's an I will, that means you have to stare at the person you're working with and figure out how to make it work. You and your spouse have an unspoken arrangement in a contract in which each of you is committed to meeting each other's needs as long as they meet yours. And that's a stupid thing because that's called fair and just. Well, here's the deal. Fair is a place where they judge pigs. There is no fair in a relationship. There's no fair in your life. If your spouse is sick, you probably are going to have to take time off of work to deal with their crap. If your kids are sick, you're probably going to have to deal with their crap. If your spouse is in a bad mood, you're probably going to have to accommodate that kind of stupidity that they're going to bring to destroy everybody's day. People are jerks. People are assholes. They love to be selfish. And guess what? It's not fair. And that includes you and your spouse. And so we have to understand that part of marriage is understanding the idea that I don't get fair and just here. I have to just keep contributing. And I have to also keep a good attitude. And I have to be resilient. And I have to understand what forgiveness is. What is forgiveness? Forgiveness means I understand your intention rather than focusing on what you did to me. People that can't forgive are always looking at what you did to me. You had an affair. You said this horrible thing to me. Well, if you're going to go down that path and just keep beating on the bad thing, you're not very smart, number one. And number two, you don't know how to forgive. And so don't call yourself a Christian. The deal is, if you understand forgiveness, forgiveness means I know this bad thing happened, but I really need to understand what your intentions were. Was it to hurt me? Was it selfish? What was it? Because if I understand your intention, I have the grounds of forgiveness. Because oftentimes, good intentions lead to bad outcomes. The other thing is, when you're in a contract marriage, you do your part around the house. As long as they do theirs, you'll encourage your spouse. You'll be sensitive to their needs. You'll go out of your way to do favors, but you expect everything in return. And the real thing is, a contract marriage is depressing as hell because it comes with expectations. What are expectations? Well, that is the remedy to depression. If I have unmet expectations, somebody is going to be a failure. Somebody is going to have betrayed me. And if I'm going to live and somebody I can't trust, those are pretty nasty conflict emotions to not trust someone, to feel betrayed, to feel like a failure or they are a failure. If you're married to a failure or a betrayer, and you're suddenly going to treat them with resentment and you're going to treat them poorly. So, if you don't want to be depressed, you have to eliminate expectations and convert them into preferences. I prefer you talk to me like this. I prefer we did this instead of that. I prefer that things would have went this way instead of that way. I prefer that we go this place instead of that place. Now you can communicate a preference all day long and never offend. The problem is that people in a contract marriage are all about expectations. Depressing as hell. The worst thing you could do is going to be horrible. It's torture to be in a contract marriage. It is preference, preference, preference. If you communicate with preferences, that means you put your needs forward and your partner has a chance to learn how to love you. Deal making is nothing about love. Deal making is about partnership and co-parenting and living as roommates. And a lot of people do that nowadays. They have to have their person, but that doesn't mean they're in love with their person. That means they have their permanent object, like their blankie or their little stuffed animal that becomes their spouse. That's what most people need. They need to have the comfort of an income, the comfort of having their home, the comfort of their kids being able to go to school, the comfort of having their car. And if I get divorced, I'm going to lose all that. So I'm trapped in this marriage. Well, marriage is not meant to be a trap. It's meant to be a life. But if you're not committed to your marriage, you're not committed to your life, and you're going to make your life miserable because you're always going to be fighting the contract. When you approach marriage as a covenant, you're entering to a partnership of I will. It is a covenant, and you're committing yourself to loving, to serving, to meeting the needs of your spouse simply because you love them, and it's not a repayment of what they've done or a repayment of what you expect of each other. There's nothing to do with expectations. This means that you will do your best to provide emotional support without demanding sex in return. It means that you find ways of easing your spouse's workload, even if they've been grumpy and unkind. It means that you commit to forgiving the wrongs of your spouse rather than using them for leverage. Well, you did this to me. Conflict is no longer viewed as an emotional threat when you trust you are loving each other because, in short, a covenant view of marriage is rooted in a selfless commitment to love and serve your spouse regardless of what you get in return. And does that mean you sit around and be abused? No, that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is both of you being fully committed to each other. But there's ingredients you have to have in a covenant. And we're going to talk about that in the next segment. So come back. Welcome back, everybody. All right, we're talking about being trapped in a covenant marriage. There are ingredients that we have to have if you're going to be successful in a covenant marriage. And they're kind of wrapped around your vows if you take traditional vows that are mentioned in the Bible. So we have to ask ourselves, well, what is it that a woman wants and what a woman expects in a marriage? And there's one ingredient, and it's a real important one. And if you're too stupid to figure it out, you're not going to be very happily married. And if you're too stubborn to be able to give this ingredient, you're probably going to be nagged until you're dead. That ingredient is cherish. I can't be the man I am without her. I don't even know why she's with me. I'm lucky to have her. She is my best friend. It is that way when I'm with her. It's that way when I'm not with her. She knows me better than I know myself. That means that you put your spouse, your female spouse, in the middle of your life, in a place on the planet, not with God, but on the planet that puts her as the center of your life. The center of your life, not you in the center, her in the center, because she has to breed with you. And if you're going to have kids, her body's going to blow up like a freaking tent. And it's going to get bigger. And it's going to get out of shape. And it's going to get flabby. And it ain't going to look that great sometimes. And then she's got to put it all back together after she has a baby and pray to God you're attracted to whatever the hell's left. And that's because a woman, if you in a traditional marriage, sacrifices her life, her future, her body, her time, her energy to raising a child, raising children, blowing up her body. And so why are women so sensitive when they're raising children in the first years? Because they're trying to figure out if their husband cherishes them. And if she sees he cares more about his golf game or his work or spending time with his friends or spending time with other women or with alcohol or with sports or with drugs, she's probably not going to be very happy. You're supposed to be cherishing your wife. That is the ingredient. And if you can give that to your wife and she knows that she is number one in your life, she is the most important person in your life. You are there to take care of her, to make her safe. You are there to focus on her needs. If you are that guy, you're probably going to be married for a very long time. Now, do all women deserve that? No. Many of them are heinous Godzillas. But the problem is that when you get married, your job is to cherish your wife. And you have to figure out how to do that. And a lot of that has to do with love languages. You know, love language could be intimacy. It could be spending time together. It could be buying them things. It could be doing things for them. It could be words of affirmation. Because those are needs. One of those languages is your spouse's love language. And if you don't know what the hell that love language is, why in the heck are you married? And if you keep giving them what you love, that's not love. You need to learn how to love your spouse the way that they need to be loved. And it's a need. Once again, it's not a want, it's a need. And it's emotional. It's not logical. So if you're one of these analytical, logical turds, you better get over yourself and understand that you better learn how to love your spouse the way they need to be loved, which is their love language. It's a very serious thing. And if you don't do that, you're not finding the pathway to their heart. So you're making your life miserable for no reason. But if you're going to be that stupid to love your spouse the way you want to receive love, if you're going to be that stupid, you're probably going to be pretty miserable. So the bottom line is that a woman needs to feel cherished. Can't be the man I am without her. Don't know why she's with me. Lucky to have her. I'm so proud to be with her. I talk about her when I'm with her, talk about when I'm not with her. Now, what does a man need? So a man needs to feel respect. Now, what is respect? And it's a part of cherish, by the way. So, respect means I have a voice. Respect means that you know me well enough to know what I want or what I need in this life. That means that my wife may not agree with me. I don't expect her to agree with me, but at least she understands where I'm coming from. That is to have a voice with your spouse. Now, women, especially nowadays, love to forecast what you're thinking, love to tell you who you are, love to tell you the story about your life, tell you the story about who you are to them, tell you what a crappy person you are. Look at the 1% of your behavior in this life and turn that into you. And when women do that, they really disrespect their husband. And if you're going to disrespect your husband, guess what? You've demasculated him. He's not going to want to have sex with you. That ain't sexy. So the deal is, if you've got a spouse that thinks she's right about everything and doesn't know how to listen and doesn't really care and doesn't validate, okay, I understand what you're coming from. I understand what you're thinking. I understand why you're critical of me. I can receive that. So that means a non-defensive wife who understands. That is what a man needs to feel married and feel safe in his marriage. Now, women need that too. The non-defensive. Why are you going to have conflict in a marriage without understanding that you just need to understand each other? I mean, if you're going to have a conflict in marriage, it's about making your relationship better. It's not about destroying each other. So conflict in marriage, in a committed marriage, is about us understanding each other. So listening is a huge ingredient, and it's a part of cherish. And if you don't get these two things, cherish, respect is listening. If we don't get those two things from 30,000 feet up, there's a good chance this marriage is only a contract marriage. Christians have great motivation to love with an I will. When the Apostle Paul talks about marriage in Ephesians 5, he reminds us that Christian marriage is patterned after Christ's love for the church. We are to love our spouse in the same manner that Jesus loves the church, and the pattern of loving his church is indeed built on an I will mindset. Now, that is a weird thing to say, but here we go. What is Jesus? What was Jesus? Jesus was a soul living a human life. He put the soul before the human. We are humans with a soul, so we lead with our human. What Jesus understood is that people by nature are flawed. People by nature are very biased about what they want and what they feel is right. People interpret the world the way that it's most convenient for them. He understood that if you're a tax collector, a prostitute, or whatever, he understood that your soul is good, but your human is always not as good. And so he gave human beings forgiveness because he came from the soul. And he understood the power of the soul. And if we could actually understand how to love each other from a soul perspective, and what is a soul perspective? A soul is, how do you suffer as a soul in the human life that you live? That is why in marriage, in a covenant marriage, what is most important ingredient is that you'd have a couple who cares about each other's feelings, each other's perceptions, not each other's facts. It's not about how was your day, who did you talk to, what did you do. Those are the dumbest questions you can ask your spouse. If you want a real question, ask them how they feel about the baseball game. How do you feel about our kids' grades? How do you feel about us? How do you feel about dinner tonight? How do you feel about your day? How do you feel about your boss? This is what we talk about in marriage if we want to be in a covenant marriage. We have to care about each other's feelings, not your thoughts, your feelings, because that is your soul, and that is where you suffer the most. And what do we need to receive? We need to stop being defensive and try to fix each other's feelings. We need to hear each other's feelings and understand, okay, I'm sorry you feel that way about me. I'm sorry you feel that way. I can understand how you feel that way. It's important that you feel that way. Those are really valid feelings. You're supposed to validate each other's feelings. That's the work of marriage. Unfortunately, provider men and over emotional women get themselves their knickers in a twist because they have to be so right and they have to be fact based. Well, if we save, $40,000 in the next 3 weeks, we're going to make it. If we sell the house, this is going to be a problem. If kids don't go to this kind of school, if you don't drive that kind of car, we have all these stupid hypothetical, solutions. That's not what life is about. It's about your feelings. And that is what marriage is about. You get married to someone because of how you feel about them, not what they are or what ideas that they have. That may be a part of what attracts you, but the bottom line is the feeling that ultimately is what makes a marriage work. The concept of marriage in the Bible is often portrayed as a sacred covenant, a profound and divine commitment between two people. And that union transcends legal contracts. It's seen as a binding agreement that aligns with God's intention for relationships. And in biblical terms, marriage symbolizes not only the union of two people, but also mirrors the relationship between Christ and the church. Understanding sets the crucial context of what's considered as breaking or violating that covenant. But however, what happens is people get married and they don't really research or they don't really know the background of their spouse, especially narcissists. Narcissists love to get married within 6 weeks. I knew on the first date that I wanted to marry her. That is a narcissist because they got to marry you as fast as possible before you find out that they're a narcissist. What are narcissists attracted to? Codependents. So they need their codependent to get through life so they can be right about everything, and the codependent can be the crazy one. But the bottom line is that marriage as a covenant comes with all kinds of problems. Because if you have one who believes in a covenant and the other who believes in a contract, you're going to have a big problem. That's why they always say, if you're a Christian, marry a Christian. Don't marry a non-Christian because you're going into a contract marriage in their mind and you're going into a covenant marriage in your mind. Not a good idea. They don't match up very well because one is a half-ass commitment and the other is a full commitment. That's a problem. And even if you marry somebody that calls himself a Christian and they're just a half-ass a Christian that goes to church on Christmas Day or some stupid thing like that, that ain't a good idea either. If you're really going to enter a covenant, you have to talk about a covenant. And that comes with premarital counseling. That comes with really understanding what you're getting into. One of the most cited reasons for breaking a covenant marriage is infidelity. And it commonly referred to as adultery. And the scriptures are quite explicit, particularly passages like Exodus 20:14, where the seventh commandment states, "You shall not commit adultery." Infidelity represents a profound betrayal of trust and commitment that binds a couple together. But when one partner engages in sexual relations outside the marriage, it fundamentally undermines the integrity of the covenant. This action not only breaks the emotional bond, but also introduces a sense of violation against the promises made before God, the community, and each other. Desertion is another factor that can break the covenant. Corinthians 7:15. We find that an unbelieving spouse chooses to leave the marriage. The believing spouse is not bound to those circumstances. This highlights the reality that the relationship can be severed due to abandonment. If one partner walks away from the relationship, they're effectively severing the covenant. But we have to understand also abuse, whether physical, emotional, or psychological, creates an environment that can break the marriage covenant as well. And it's important to understand that if you're going to be in a covenant marriage, you don't do affairs, you don't do desertion, you don't do abuse. But here's the ingredient that keeps people together. Hey, you're not going to treat me like that. If you decide to treat me like that, there is the door. We are in a covenant marriage. I am stuck with your ugly ass. If you're going to be staring at this chick down the street, there's the door. Decide what you want. That's a 60-year marriage. Setting boundaries, setting an understanding of what it takes to be married to each other. That is a very important part of marriage. Setting boundaries and fighting not in your marriage, but for your marriage. It's also very understanding that we have to be equally yoked. But equally yoked means we have to listen to understand each other. We have to listen and care about each other's feelings. We have to care about how each other is interpreting the world. We don't need to coddle unhealthy feelings, but what we have to do is understand where those feelings are coming from. You know, it's really important to understand that in a covenant is not meant to debate. A covenant is meant to be understood and figured out. That is what it takes to be in this life. That's what it takes. We've got to commit. But people are so selfish and want things so much their own way that they have, and very childish, they have a lot of trouble with the covenant. The other thing is, now that we live in these big cities and we're really not under the radar in our marriage, and people are not hearing us argue, the problem is that marriage was meant to be in small communities where people would hear you arguing, and they attended your wedding and they'd say, you can't do this crap. You better learn how to communicate. You know, you better learn how to love each other. People held each other accountable in small communities, in churches. You know, that's what they did. But nowadays, we live in these weasel covenants, which are contracts. And we sit around and we get off the radar and we sit on our little, computer and try to find somebody else to have an affair with, or try to find a prostitute, try to find ways to spend our money, try to find ways to connect with other people that we shouldn't be, find ways to buy things we shouldn't be buying. We do all this stupid stuff on the internet, which leaves us with no accountability whatsoever. What could be the killer of many marriages, including covenant marriages, is a lack of communication. And the Bible stresses the importance of open and honest dialogue between two people. What's really understood is that we have to be a whole person in a marriage. What is a whole person? A whole person means I am completely flawed. It's okay that you understand my feelings, you understand my thoughts. I can communicate all my feelings and all my thoughts and just throw it out there. And if I'm with my spouse, they accept it. That is a part of who we are, that we can be honest and whole with each other. If you're in a covenant marriage, that's what you are required to be, to accept your partner for who they are, not try to create who you want them to be. These are important things in marriages. Understanding that communication is everything. Communication is also nonverbal. That means it's meta communication. For instance, if you have a couple who don't touch each other, you have a couple who are probably roommates. If you don't touch each other and get into the body space, the 2-foot body space that all of us has, you're not marking your territory that you belong to me and I belong to you. And as long as you're not doing that, there's a really good chance that you're very lonely in your marriage. There's a really good chance intimacy is a big problem. And there's a really good chance you're going to want to be in an affair with somebody else. You got to get in that body space. And that's nonverbal communication. And you got to have that with each other so that you remind each other on a daily basis that I belong to you and you belong to me. Does that mean you hover? Does that mean you keep your hand on her ass all day long? No. It means you touch, you kiss, you give a touch on the forehead, a kiss on the touch of the knee, a touch on the back. These are important ingredients to marriage. To be able to keep it is reminding each other that we belong together, which changes the way you communicate. All right, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come right back. Welcome, everybody. We're talking about being trapped in a covenant marriage. One of the things that breaks people up, we were talking about earlier, is communication. When conversations break down, resentment gets really big. Partners feel isolated and misunderstood. They start labeling each other. There's a thing called a confirmation bias. What that means is that 2% of the time, I see you being very selfish and not caring about me. Could be 5% of the time. Could be more than that. So 5% of the time, I think you're being selfish. Now, what happens is during the 95% of the time that we're get together, I'm collecting evidence to prove that you're a selfish person. And so I don't care that we're having a good time, we're going to the movies, we're laughing, having a nice dinner, we're spending time together, we're watching a movie, we're cuddling. I don't care. I don't care about that. What I care about is the 5% of the time that you're a total selfish jerk. And I care about collecting evidence that you're a total selfish jerk so I can tell myself how right I am about you. That's called a confirmation bias. Many people that resent each other, you don't ever want to have sex with me. So that's another story that they have to have confirmation bias. Uh, you're a bad person. Another confirmation bias. You're a terrible parent. Another confirmation bias. You're having an affair. Another confirmation bias. You're having an emotional affair with someone else. Another confirmation bias. So we sit around and create these stories and we create confirmation bias to spend our entire time in misery together looking for evidence of what a jerk you really are. That's what people do when they resent each other. They stop listening, and they only listen for their stupid confirmation biases. So that means that I am constantly mislabeled. Oh, yeah, okay, we're having a great time, and all of a sudden you bring up that you want to go play golf with your friends. Yes, you're just selfish. That's all you are. You're selfish because you want to go play with your friends. See, it's just evidence you don't ever want to be with me. See, this is the kind of thing that people do, and they're so stupid. We are not on this planet to be right about each other. We're on this planet, and you're stuck in a relationship to figure out how to understand each other and make room. Oh, so you want to be with your friends. I understand you want to be with your friends. Hey, I would like to be with you too. Can we spend some time together? That would be healthy communication, but instead, people have to be right. Oh, you're this, you're that, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on and on. People are so crazy. Without continual, honest communication, and by the way, when somebody's got confirmation bias, they're not safe. You're not going to want to have sex with them. You don't want to have sex with somebody that thinks you're a terrible person. That sucks. That's not sexy. It's not even nice. And then they want to have, oh, well, I want you to be your complete person with me. You have to ask yourself, how much of myself do I have to sacrifice just to be with this jerk that I married? Well, the deal is if you have to sacrifice a lot of yourself, you're going to resent that person. What you want to have is honest communication. And you've got to communicate that as a goal. If we're going to be who we are, we have to learn to accept each other. We have to learn to understand each other, and we have to learn to put each other first. That's a very important thing. But we also have to be safe. And that means we're not defensive. That I'm actually willing to apologize that you see me like a total jerk. I'm okay apologizing that you see me as a total jerk. That means you take down your defenses. When you do that, you're giving each other permission to be your whole self with each other, which is very sexy, by the way. The bond of marriage often weakens, making it easier for partners to drift apart, and then they seek solace somewhere else. And that is because the breakdown becomes a major disruptor of the covenant. And that's because we label each other throughout our marriage and create what we think of each other. And we communicate to each other from our confirmation bias. And we feel resentful that we can never be who we are with our spouse. And now someone else comes along and they treat us like a human being. and they give us respect, and they want to hear what we have to think, and they want to hear what we feel, and they actually are attracted, that is very sexy compared to this crap you get at home. So if you're going to play the game of confirmation bias with each other, you're setting yourself up for an affair. Blame yourselves. You know, understanding what breaks a marriage covenant in the Bible is crucial for the longevity and the health of a relationship. Marriage is meant to be a reflection of God's love and commitment. Recognizing the potential pitfalls is helpful for people to navigate challenges. But it takes a lot of work to be married. It also takes a lot of work to forgive. It also takes a lot of courage to communicate openly. But people that welcome and are safe with each other to share their feelings about everything in the world and not get defensive and actually process those feelings are welcoming a covenant marriage. You know, the covenant signifies not just a social agreement or a legal contract, but a spiritual bond that's deeply rooted in a divine purpose for God to mold us and to teach us through hardship, through suffering, through this total jerk that I married, to have to learn how to deal with hard things in your life. And what does hard do? Hard makes your life better. That is the ingredient of what hard is all about. Hard means that I have to invest in something hard to learn how to make my life easier, because every hard thing that I learn makes my life easier. If I learn how to be a plumber, I get to make a living being a plumber. That makes my life easier. If I learn how to do something into my house, it makes my life easier because I don't have to hire somebody to do it. I mean, these are important things in life. We're supposed to do hard. And the relationship is the hardest thing you're going to do in this life. But lazy people who want to watch television and social media and do nothing all day long and don't even know how to carry on a conversation have no point of being married. You have no point of having a sex organ. If you're lazy, you have no business being married. It takes work. It takes commitment. That's what you need to be. Lazy people do not survive. Lazy people are not resilient. Lazy people, you drop their ugly ass in the middle of a jungle, they'd be dead in a week. That is not what we're built to be. We're meant to live in the jungle. We're meant to be present. We're meant to be with each other. You know, our lives used to be very unsafe. If you wanted to eat, you'd have to catch something or find a plant, find something to eat. You would have to forage. We don't do that anymore. We are so safe. We are out of touch with what appreciation we need to have just to be alive. We don't have to work to be alive. But if you're going to be married, it does require work because you have two really whacked out, strange creatures who are trying to make a life together, who come from very strange places, who have very strange relatives, who have very strange customs, and we got to deal with that crap. And you got to learn it. Now, when people had arranged marriages, they had to learn it because they didn't know who they were marrying. So they had to embrace each other's family. They had to they had to understand each other's quirkiness. They had to get to know each other. They had to figure things out. That's why covenant marriages work, because you don't even know who the hell you're marrying, and you got to get to know them, which is the basis of what it takes to be married. You got to keep getting to know them your whole life. Maintaining a strong covenant is essential. A thriving marriage brings numerous benefits like emotional support, companionship, a loving environment for children to grow. It reflects the unity and love of Christ for his church. But here's the deal. You can love someone and not trust them. But when you trust someone, the love will grow. So marriage is not about love. It is about trust. Financial trust, physical trust, emotional trust. Very important. If you cannot be trusted in any of those departments or in even one of them, you have no business being married. Now, do you have to trust each other throughout the course of marriage. No, no, you don't. You're going to violate each other's trust because you're selfish turds who'd like to do things the way you like to do things. We're thoughtless. We're selfish. We're flawed. And yes, you're going to violate each other's trust financially, emotionally, physically. We're going to do these things. So what we have to understand is we have to look at each other and go, wow, I violated my trust in you. Now what do I do? Well, if you want to get trust back in a covenant marriage, you have to go, hey, I know you don't trust me because I did this. I don't need you to trust me. I need you to have faith in me until you do trust me. Can we just walk on the bridge of you having faith in me until you do trust me? That's how you heal the trust in a marriage, a covenant marriage. It's very important for you to ask your partner, once you've violated their trust, after you've learned your lesson, after you have claimed your testimony, to go, hey, I don't expect you to trust me. I don't know when you're going to trust me. You probably never will. But I need you to have faith in me. That is a very important part of a covenant marriage, is learning how to keep it together, because the trust is the binder of the book. You can have somebody that you trust and they're a friend and you haven't seen them in 10 years. And when you come back together, there's a real good chance, because you trust each other, the relationship will just take off like a rocket. In marriage, you work on trust to build your love. If you don't have the freedom to understand each other's perceptions, if you don't have the communication to be able to talk about anything, if you don't have the commitment of a covenant in your marriage, and I will, not an I'll try, not one of these half-assed people that sit around thinking about what it's going to be like to be single and then be married. Not that. I'm talking about I will be married. Those people, when you go down that path, the tool of I need you to have faith in me means that I care about our covenant. That's how you build trust back. Honest and open communication is a foundation of a thriving marriage. Listening to each other's thoughts, feelings, expressing your own with empathy, resolving conflicts with love and understanding help you build a strong connection. Now, what is empathy? Well, someone jumps off the cliff and you jump off with them. That's sympathy. So you're both sitting at the bottom whining about your broken legs. And probably the one that jumped off the cliff is going to blame you for why they jumped off the cliff. Empathy is when someone jumps off the cliff and you stand at the top and you go, hey, I'm really sorry you jumped off the cliff. I will throw you a rope. I'll go get you help. What do you need? That's empathy. That's what we owe each other. We're not here to fix each other's feelings. We're not here to fix each other's problems. We're here to empathize with each other's issues, empathize with each other's feelings. That's what it is to be married. You're not in charge of how your partner feels. You're only in charge of how you feel. What you are responsible for is to empathize with how they feel, to empathize with what is influencing them. That is your job in marriage. And we need to understand that's a part of the covenant. We also have to strengthen our faith together. You know, faith is life. When fear enters, faith leaves. When faith enters, fear leaves. Life is a faith-based venture. You take a leap of faith when you go to the store. You take a leap of faith when you get in your car. You take a leap of faith when you get a job, get married, have children, buy a house, make a decision of any kind. Everything is a leap of faith in this life. If you factor fear into it, you're probably not going to make a lot of choices. Fear-based people are depressed. Fear-based people are indecisive. But life is faith-based, and that means that you take leaps of faith. That's how we move our life forward experientially. We have to go through experiences. We have to have experiences to learn and to gain wisdom. This is a very important part of a covenant. This is a very important part of life. But commitment, I'm telling you guys, that is essential. And a lot of people don't really understand what commitment is, but the more you commit, the more you get out of anything that you do in this life. That is an important thing to remember, especially if you're going to be married. That's our show. I want to thank everybody for listening. I'd love to hear from you. You can do that on our webpage, voiceamericamedia.com or libsyn.com, Dr. Gary Bell's Absurd Psychology. Now remember, covenants without defense are just words. And keeping covenants protects, prepares, and empowers. Thank